The Bills have made multiple roster moves. They have released a few players, they have restructured some contracts, added several free agents, and even made a trade that helped them move up in the draft. So, in this episode, I want to break down everything that's happened since the DJ Moore trade and talk about how this roster is starting to shape up heading into the rest of the offseason. And honestly, I think Brandon Beane may be cooking a little bit here. This is the 23rd episode of the Down South Bills podcast. I am your host, Devin Long. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And with that being said, let's get into the roster moves and the departures. So some of the Bills players that were cut: Taylor Rapp, Curtis Samuel, and Dane Jackson. Taylor Rapp, he dealt with some injuries last year, but ultimately I didn't see a reason to keep him around, especially with there being a new defense. And I just felt like he may be a player that's maybe aged out of his best years. And so I think making a new roster addition there and kind of moving on in the safety room was the correct way to go, especially with the amount of money that it saved by releasing him. I believe it was around $3 million. So I think that was just a no-brainer for Brandon Beane. About the same situation with Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel just couldn't stay healthy throughout any of his time in Buffalo. And when he was on the field, he did do some positive things, but ultimately the role that he was paid to play in Buffalo just never came to fruition. And so ultimately, I'm not mad about Curtis Samuel being released either. And so I think it's just good that we are taking new strides in the wide receiver room, notably with the trade for DJ Moore so far. And then Dane Jackson was a depth piece released as well. And so don't have too much of a problem with that either. Most game days he was inactive. So, you know, good to move on from him in the cornerback room and hopefully get a little bit younger behind Maxwell Harrison. Another person that was supposed to be released but ended up being traded was Taron Johnson. Taron Johnson was traded to the Las Vegas Raiders. The biggest part of that was basically just draft positioning. Buffalo moved up from pick 228 to pick 182, and I actually love the value from that standpoint. The Bills moved up almost 50 spots in the draft while also clearing a little bit of cap space in the future. We do have a dead cap hit for Taron Johnson this year, but after this year, it will be fully moved off of Taron Johnson's cap hit for the most part. And so I think that's solid. Just going ahead and kind of moving on there because you know he's not going to be your long-term slot cornerback in this Jim Leonard defense. And then the Bills also restructured some contracts. They restructured the contract of Josh Allen, Dawson Knox, as well as Ed Oliver. The only one that surprised me here a little bit was Ed Oliver, just because of the injuries last year. But this is a clear indicator that Buffalo is confident in Ed Oliver and Jim Leonard's defense going forward into the future. And these moves really just created a lot of cap flexibility to obviously sign DJ Moore and then cut his cap hit down. But we ultimately needed to get the money free to be able to sign him and that full 24.5 million, and then we did cut that down, but we did need that. So restructuring all these guys really kind of set that up, as well as the re-signings and signings that I will get into next. So starting with the re-signings, Mitch Wisnowski, he played pretty solid when he came in last year. Had a couple of punts inside the 5 that were really clutch, and don't really have any problems with him. You're obviously going to need a punter. Hopefully we don't have to use him too much because we're scoring touchdowns. But ultimately, I think he's a pretty good signing, and it came out that it's a minimum deal, and I think that's, neither a bad thing or a good thing, just a pretty solid thing to do by Brandon Beane. The Bills also re-signed Connor McGovern, which was a surprise to some of us because Connor McGovern was in a magazine, not a magazine, in an article saying that he didn't think he was gonna sign with the Buffalo Bills. Said that his agency hadn't heard from the Buffalo Bills since his exit press conference at the end of the season. And so nobody really thought that Connor McGovern was going to sign back because he himself said that he thought his time was up in Buffalo. But it turns out that his agents did speak to Brandon Beane at the Combine, and they ultimately got a deal done before legal tampering. So I think it's good that we got Connor McGovern back. It was said that Josh Allen helped orchestrate that deal, which is, I don't know. Josh Allen's just more and more involved here. I hope that leads to wins and not something else. So, but ultimately on the offensive line, having a new offensive line coach in Pat Meyer, I'm glad that we have 4 remaining offensive linemen that are, pretty solid here. And we've had a good offensive line for several years. Josh Allen did get hit a good bit last year, but I think that was maybe more so scheme and just Josh Allen sometimes maybe moving around too long and maybe working himself into those hits. But having Pat Meyer as a new offensive line coach, I think he has some good experience developing young offensive linemen as the Pittsburgh Steelers were developing some young offensive linemen, some pretty solid guys. So I think him helping one of our younger guys, maybe a Cedric Van Prangranger, a Tylen Gray will move into that left guard spot. I think he'll be the right guy to do that. Also having some experience working under Aaron Kromer, as well as our assistant offensive line coach still being there who worked under Aaron Kromer. So I think that spot that they're going to fill in the left guard spot, I'm pretty confident that they can fill that in house. So going from that into our free agency additions, we did sign D. Alford, slot cornerback from the Atlanta Falcons. Pretty solid slot cornerback. He does have some bad clips, but I think he's one of those guys who's better against those smaller, fidgety, more quick zig type runner, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel type route runners versus those big slot guys like a Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson. It's a pretty bad clip on X of Justin Jefferson kind of getting D. Alford turned all around in circles, but I think that's more so D. Alford not being good against power slots, and I think we have a solution for that I'll get into, but ultimately I think D. Alford isn't going to play all the snaps. I think he's going to play a good bit of the snaps. I think in nickel dime, I think he's going to be out there a good bit, but I do think against some of the bigger slot guys in the NFL, I think he may come off the field. And ultimately his deal was 3 years, $15.75 million, which isn't a crazy deal at all. And I think it may be only about 2 years guaranteed or something like that. So I think it's a pretty solid signing at slot cornerback. I think PFF or someone had him number one as the highest rated slot corner in 2025. Don't quote me on that, but I think it's somewhere around there that I did see on D. Alford. So he is a pretty solid player, and I think he has some limitations according to his size, but I think he's definitely a solid player that's going to have some very good contributions to this Jim Leonhard defense. Another solid signing we had was backup quarterback. We signed Kyle Allen. He's been here before in Buffalo, backed up Josh Allen. And I think because we lost Mitch Trubisky to Tennessee, Brian Daboll, I think this is a good pivot here. He's good friends with Josh Allen, and I think that's the most important thing here. I don't think our backup quarterback has to be someone who we think can actually get in there and win us a few games because let's be honest, we all want to see Josh Allen play. And, if it happens, it happens. But I think ultimately we want this to be someone who, when Josh Allen is playing, is someone who just keeps Josh Allen comfortable. And it's just someone who can be his friend there and kind of help him when he makes mistakes and kind of point things out on the iPad and, just be in his ear that way. I don't think this is a bad or a good thing here. I think getting someone cheaper than what we could have got Mitch Trubisky for, we can't overpay for a backup quarterback. We don't necessarily have that luxury. So I think just having someone who's a solid guy, solid backup, solid veteran in this league, someone who's close friends with Josh Allen is a good thing to do here at backup quarterback. Getting back to the defense, the Bills signed Bradley Chubb, one of the bigger signings for the Buffalo Bills so far. Chubb was the 5th overall pick in 2018. Really like him as a player. He plays hard, solid pass rusher, really good against the run, has a very high motor, and he does have some injury history. These are big injuries. I think he had like 2 ACLs or something like that. But he doesn't have those ticky-tack injuries that kind of keep you out, like a week here, a week there, kind of like those Curtis Samuel injuries, not to continue to throw shade at Curtis Samuel, but he doesn't have those. If he's playing, he's playing. If he's out type thing. And I don't know if that's good or bad for you, just something to kind of note. And I think Chubb can give us around 8 to 12 sacks. I think that's going to be a big addition for our defense. I think we're still going to draft an edge rusher, but I think him along with Greg Rousseau, Michael Hoyt type of pairings, I think that's going to be pretty good. The deal is essentially like 2 years, $29 million, which is very reasonable. I think it's like the 31st or 30th highest paid edge rusher in the league, and I think he's going to give us that kind of production, fingers crossed. So I think that's pretty solid. And anything he gives us more than that is definitely going to be a plus. And I think he has that potential, but ultimately not necessarily expecting that, just kind of expecting him to be, if healthy, around that 8 to 12 sack range. And I just think that's going to be a very good addition to the Jim Leonhard defense, especially with Jim Leonhard's aggressive defensive mindset. Other additions on the defense, the Bills signed C.J. Gardner-Johnson at safety, and this was a very surprising signing for me. He brings a loud personality, plays with a lot of energy. I think he has like this one hit, like or several hits where he just kind of like comes downhill and just like smacks guys. Sometimes he misses, sometimes he lands them, and that's why he has like a high missed tackle rate. But he's a very aggressive guy, knows how to take the ball away. He has 2 6 interception seasons. And I mean, he's just a very dynamic player. He can play in the slot, he can play corner, he can play safety. I think he's best maybe as an over the top safety. I think that complements Cole Bishop perfectly. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, he played for the Eagles when they didn't win the championship and made the championship, the Super Bowl, and he played when they won the Super Bowl. And after that Super Bowl year, he left, went to the Houston. He was traded to the Houston Texans. Didn't really work out because he wasn't getting playing time. And so I think he spoke to the Bills about why some of those things wasn't working out. Last year he played on 3 teams. He's played on 8 teams since he's come into the NFL. So he has bounced around a bit, but I don't necessarily think this is due to his performance. The way that he performs on the field, I mean, I think it really speaks for itself, the impact that he can have. He is an aggressive player, so he does have some whiffs or some tackles that he misses, and some assignments that he may miss because he's just trying to like read the quarterback's eyes and make a play. But ultimately, I think this is a guy that the Bills will love to have on their defense. I won't go as far as to where Emmanuel Acho said something like the Bills didn't have any dogs and he's a dog. I won't say that because I think Jordan Poyer, like some of the guys that we've had are dogs. Like I think we've had some dog. I think Taylor Rapp, although it be like friendly fire sometimes, I think he was kind of like that dog mentality. Wasn't necessarily as good of a player as C.J. Gardner-Johnson, but I do think we've had some players that have played with that aggressive mindset. Maybe not as loud as C.J. Gardner-Johnson, which I'm glad that he brings that, but I don't want to knock too bad on the players that have been through Buffalo because I do think they have had some very dynamic, very explosive, and those just kind of players. So I don't want to necessarily knock that, but CJ Gardner-Johnson definitely brings a dynamic that he brings something special that we haven't seen yet. I'll say that, and that's just really a compliment to him. And I think he's gonna be special in this Buffalo Bills defense. I don't know. I'm not sure if this was a player that Sean McDermott would have got on the team. I'm not sure. I don't know. Some people say that hindsight is 2020. There's no way to tell, but my prediction is that's just what I think. I think McDermott would not have had C.J. Gardner-Johnson be one of his safeties. That's just me, but I could be wrong. Also, the Bills signed Geno Stone. Geno Stone is another safety, and I think he's a true free safety. Ultimately, I have friends. I have a friend, Nick Suber, who he's a Bengals fan, and when fans of other teams lose players and they're just happy that player's gone, like he's happy Geno Stone is gone, and he's like Geno Stone can't tackle anyone, like, and that just like that makes you feel away. But ultimately, the Bengals, they have had a bad defense recently. And when you're on a bad defense, it's kind of like everyone kind of sticks out when they do bad. So like I don't know. I know that Jordan Love didn't have many interceptions last year, and I know that Geno Stone picked him off. Um, Geno Stone, I looked at a little bit of his film, as I said, but I just think he's gonna be a depth player. I think he's gonna play kind of as I mentioned how D. Alfred is kind of short. I think maybe because of versatility, Cole Bishop or C.J. Gardner-Johnson move down into that slot when we have bigger guys in the slot, and then I think that maybe bumps D. Alfred out and then bumps Geno Stone into that extra free safety because I think he's comfortable being that player. So I think that's maybe where he's kind of used as a situational player and a depth piece, and also someone who plays special teams. I think that's ultimately where he's used. But he was signed on a minimal deal, and I don't think I don't think he's gonna have too much of effect on the cap to where we need to really hate or love him. I think he's gonna be a good player for this team, as well as I think C.J. Gardner-Johnson is, and all the other players I named. I think Brandon Beane, as I said, I think he's cooking right now. I don't. It's not gonna the most flashiest thing, you know what I'm saying? Like, but I think he's making some very solid moves that we could be proud of going into the draft and the rest of free agency as things kind of sum up here. But overall, my defensive view, I just think we have a pretty good secondary now. I think we may need one more corner behind Maxwell Harrison. Depending on the situation with Dorian Strong, if he comes back or not, we'll have to see where that kind of how that kind of shapes up. But I think at safety, I think especially with Jordan Hancock, who I didn't even mention, I think I think we have a pretty good safety room, and I think Jim Leonard being a previous safety, I think that's kind of the spot he knew he wanted to shore up first. But I think ultimately we just need a backup corner behind Maxwell Harrison, maybe even bringing back Trey White, but he may want to start somewhere, which he may deserve the way that he played last year. I think we need an inside linebacker to kind of complement Terrell Bernard and also Dorian Williams and Joe Andreessen there. And then I think we need one of those true nose tackles on the defense. Other than that, I think the defense is pretty solid going into the draft. I think we need a speed receiver, whether we get that in free agency or in the draft. But I think the roster's shaping out pretty good, going into the draft, just kind of drafting, based on, I think we're gonna go receiver or edge early. But I think other than that, we're not really necessarily filling holes. I think we're just kind of drafting. We're filling holes, but we're drafting best available based upon those holes versus saying, hey, we absolutely have to get a receiver in this round. We absolutely have to get an edge. We absolutely have to get a center. Like I think we're more so, hey, if there's a very, very good edge here, we're taking the edge. If there's a very, very good receiver here, we're taking the receiver type. Like I think we have options in the draft versus not filling in some of these holes and then, having to go into the draft saying we absolutely need this and we need it to hit. I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. But overall, I think Brandon Beane, as I said a bunch of times so far, I think he's doing a solid job. I just think he's doing a solid. People may say that DJ Moore trade was an overpay. I think there were some teams offering a third rounder for DJ Moore. And you have to think we pick at the end. So if teams were offering a third, their third 9 times out of 10 was higher than our third. So then we probably had to give a 2. And then we probably just wanted that 5 back to say, hey, giving us that 5 back kind of equals a very early 3, if you want to say it that way. So, and then as far as the $24.5 million a year, Alec Pierce, 47 catches as his career high, is getting $29 million annually. And you can say upside, whatever. Personally, I think DJ Moore is better than Alec Pierce. DJ Moore in an off year last year had more catches than Alec Pierce has had in his entire career as a career high. And then before that, the year before that, DJ Moore had 90 plus catches. Year before that had 90 plus catches. So take with that as you may. I think we all wanted the Bills to get a wide receiver 1 type guy. I think we got that. He's maybe a 1B, but I think he's ultimately a guy who can get open and separate against man coverage. And I think you can never have too many of those guys, especially when you have a guy like Josh Allen who can put that ball on the money. And so, yeah, we have some jersey numbers as well. DJ Moore, I think he kind of caused the ripple effect as these numbers are concerned. I'm not sure, but at the end of his introductory press conference, somebody asked him, "Do you know what number you're gonna wear?" And then he said, "I don't know," and then kind of held up a 2. And then like a day later, it comes out that DJ Moore is in number 2. McCole Hardman changed to number 1. Ray Davis changed to number 7. I don't know if this is because CJ Gardner-Johnson has number 22. I doubt it, but Ray Davis is number 7. Bradley Chubb is number 9. Greg Rousseau, number 15. Tyler Bass, number 16. D. Alford, number 23. CJ Gardner-Johnson, number 22. And Kyle Allen, number 11. Overall, love how the roster's shaping up. Brandon Beane is being aggressive but not reckless, as he says. Josh Allen now has another weapon on offense. The defense is shaping out, and we now see Jim Leonard's defensive identity kind of coming to fruition a little bit. We have Greg Rousseau listed as an outside linebacker instead of like a defensive lineman. So like a lot of interesting things coming, and I'll keep you updated with them all here on the Down South Bills podcast. If you made it to the end of the pod, thank you so much. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy the content. And as always, go Bills.